It's really lovely to have all of you here and really intrigued about how people are being creative right now, which is why I'm really happy that Jennifer, you're with us today.
Yeah.
Jen, would you mind introducing yourself? Who are you in relation to Jagged Moves and what have you been up to?
I'm the Director of Jagged Moves. I also am an instructor at Zenon and direct the school for Young Dance. In brief, creatively, I actually have been doing a lot of more reading, reflecting, and writing right now than anything else. Not necessarily producing art, but thinking of ways that my art is going to respond and be relevant moving forward.
Definitely. I think those are really important questions. Well, let's go ahead and jump in. I wanted to talk a bit more in depth about your recent work with Touch Code. I know that's why we really touched base about this. You mentioned just briefly at the start how you made the decision to close the show on March 13 after opening night. But I am curious, even though you were already kind of in the show process, what kind of point in your process did you start having those conversations about having to move away from the live show, and how did that kind of affect the experience of the show itself?
Yeah, it was such a roller coaster. So we decided to postpone the show on March 13th, which was a Friday. We decided that afternoon Friday. And then we opened on a Thursday and started technical rehearsals the Friday before. So we had been in the theater Friday, we were loading in Saturday, Sunday, and pretty all day Monday. So we were in that little technical bubble world to try to mount the show. And then starting the week, it was around us, but just at the beginning of the week, it was still seen as safe to be in small venue sizes under 200. And then day by day, feelings were changing. And then it seemed hour by hour, feelings were changing with still no response or no real direction from administration, or the governor hadn't made an announcement yet, really just responding to the community around us. And the big trigger for me, because we decided to postpone before the governor's announcement, the big trigger for me was Thursday night. We opened to about a third of the audience I thought we would. And I was receiving messages from our most committed supporters who had already bought tickets that they were feeling uncomfortable to come. And that was just tearing me apart as far as asking our most committed supporters to put themselves at risk or feel uncomfortable, and then having them make this decision that was really hard. Along that lines, I felt like I couldn't celebrate the work. It was hard to invite anyone or even simply post on social media that it was happening. So it was these things accompanying, and at the same time, we were constantly figuring out how we were going to adapt the show. I was working on live streaming. We had the theater thoroughly cleaned. We were thinking about precautionary measures as far as disinfecting the seats and armrests after each show. It was really the trigger of both our most committed supporters and then not being able to celebrate the work that turned it to say that we needed to postpone. The Southern really put it into they left it up to me, because again, there was no restrictions at that time as far as small events. And then we decided to postpone. We were still thinking about streaming, and then the governor's announcement came out. And then we just decided that we would postpone the show until further announcements.
Yeah. Definitely. No, it's definitely difficult to grieve the loss of something like that. I would love to know a little bit more about kind of your thinking and thought behind the work itself. You mentioned a little bit about celebrating that work. I'm wondering, what are the goals and kind of themes behind that work that you're really hoping to be able to share with the audience, and why postponing for that live audience is so important because of that? Yeah.
Well, two things. I appreciate how you said postpone for the live audience, because I'm not convinced, and I don't think the form can be transformed to an online experience, and that the in-person is so important, and that the ephemeral nature of dance is also, and choreography and performance is also so important. As far as this work goes, it's a deep dive into the elements of effort and space, and really in particular, the reactions of actions and the movement vocabulary that is made in the spaces between two people. That's really where the creative content was developed. And as far as reflective of this current time, when we move to remount it, right now it's tentatively set for December, the first week of September. I say tentatively, it is marked on the calendar, but not knowing, if there's going to be another surge of the pandemic at that time. But I think the remount, I know the work's going to change. It has to change. It has to change to be relevant to our current experiences, and it has to change to be able to be reflective of how the performers and the dancers are coming to it.
Yeah, I find that a very interesting question to consider, is how kind of you've been creatively influenced by this time. I know that you mentioned you've been doing a lot of writing, but I'm wondering the impact. I mean, definitely some ideas related to this work, but kind of the impact work in general. Have you been embracing the digital space? Has there been resistance to that digital space?
Well, I think immediately I absolutely drowned in work. Immediately the postponing of the show had a significant financial impact on Jagged Moves. And so immediately it was treading to try to strategize and figure this out. So that was probably a good 3 weeks into the shelter at home, was treading and try to stay afloat. The revenue streams that were being counted on for the show, ticket sales, events related to the show, even simple raffle, fundraising activities, were all factored into filling contractors' contracts. And Jagged Moves is completely committed to fulfilling those. So in the direct aftermath, it's been trying to figure out how that is going to all happen. And feeling grateful that so many resources have been put out by different organizations of different relief funds. Like, it's amazing when you go search. And then second part of that question, the bigger impact is thinking about, because now I'm starting to get nervous of how are we going to actually prepare for December. And I think the bigger impact is, when do we get to come together, and what does rehearsal look like, and what precautionary measures are we going to be needing to be in rehearsal, and in a form that is all about touch and space and being together. What will those environments look like when we're able to be together, and how can we create in those? In some ways, I almost feel more comfortable being able to be free on Zoom than if we were all covered up in the rehearsal space together. But maybe that space, maybe we'll start getting numb to that, and that won't seem so weird.
That's a really interesting point. I'm wondering, I know a lot of your work is based on that human connection. It seems very integral, both to the touch code piece, but also in general. I also know that you've done a lot with interdisciplinary work, and I remember there was live music as a part of the touch code performance.
Yeah.
I'd love to know a little bit more about how that came about for that particular work, and kind of what process did the sound score start being created with the piece, for the piece, because I also know it's part of the live component of it as well.
Yeah. Thanks for asking. I've known Julie Johnson as an artist and flautist for several years now, and just think she's absolutely extraordinary, and I've been wanting to work with her. And then I started developing this research on personal space 2 years ago. So leading up to this performance, we had I presented a nugget of the idea in a show in 2016. I toured that 10-minute nugget 2 cities nationally. We had a generating residency, and then another preview performance that you talked about earlier. So this has all been stewing for a while. So I think that there was a big emotional impact of the show being postponed with that also after 2 years of development. When I first started researching personal space, I was thinking about touch and then music and how playing the flute is so intimate. And then knowing her, and she also is such a big mover when she performs. She dances when she performs, so wanting to, and really her score, it was really fantastic. Her score actually was developed simultaneously with the movement. Oh. Like we talked and we had ideas and we shared vocabulary and we shared concepts. She would maybe come in with an idea. I would come in with an idea of movement material. We literally would start practicing together, and if things were floating, we riffed off that and let it rise. And it really developed simultaneously. It was pretty exciting. Yeah, it hasn't necessarily always been the case for me in the past with working with different musicians or different, it's been maybe some back and forth. Like I'll do something, I'll share it with you, you create something on that, and we'll kind of go back and forth with it. And this really was really cosmically simultaneous. Mm-hmm. So I do feel like this work is so attached to the live music element and is really the wanting to postpone to was able to celebrate that, to really be in a live performance space, all of us together.
Yeah. I'm also curious, kind of, well, maybe related to touch code, maybe completely unrelated. I was just noticing a bit on your website, you talked a bit about critical thinking and its place in dance. And I know you're an educator as well. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts kind of on the current time around that, or if that kind of critical thinking, creativity has influenced some of the decisions that you've made right now.
Yeah, I mean, I've always said dancers are the most adaptable people in the world. Like we listen and we read the space and we read the environment and we respond. And we adapt and we learn and we move forward and we're frugal and we're resourceful and we navigate. And I think the arts world and then the dance world in particular, online for dance has not been as forward as online for other mediums. So I feel it's been a huge jump for the dance world. And I am really proud of how the dance world has just been activated. And also, I think we continue to be activated because we're continually listening to what is working, what is not working. Mm-hmm. And then not only transforming the platform, but going week by week and saying, how can we improve this now new platform? Mm-hmm. So to answer that, I think we practice it. We practice that. And in the dance space, I work a lot with my creative process. I don't ever come to the space with, or rarely, I don't want to say don't ever, but rarely come with preconceived steps or ideas. I generate movement largely from choreography games or movement schemes. That builds a pocket or a bucket of material that helps us dissect an idea. And from that bucket of material, I'll then use a number of dance structures or creative structures to then develop the work. So it almost feels like two dances. There's the dance where you're creating the material dance, and then there's the development dance from them. And I seek out to collaborate and work with, I employ creative movers or choreographers themselves, because I definitely work in a collaborative environment and I want them to bring their voices to the environment, and the dancers fully partake in the movement generation, the material generation. And I think with doing this, I really believe that it brings equity to the space, accountability to the space. It brings variety of movement to the space, which I think is interesting. And I think we can all really learn from each other. So thinking about critical thinking in the choreography space is this idea of when we use choreographic games or movement schemes to develop material, that we're really thinking through this riddle or idea or question or inquiry, that we're constantly in inquiry while we're moving.
Yeah, I love that. It's the practice of curiosity almost.
Yeah, the practice of curiosity. And I think it really brings a real presence to the work. And also, I mean, I believe it brings an embodiment to the work.
I'd love to know what you're looking forward to, what you're most excited about kind of in the coming year for Jagged Moves in your own process. What are you looking forward to, whether it's during still stay at home or other things?
Yeah, well, I'm definitely looking forward to getting together again. And I'm really interested how being together in creative spaces, how that's going to be and what movement will generate from that. We're only, you know, it's going to be really extraordinary, that first bit of creative material that's made together and what that looks like. I think there'll be a real appreciation for the space. I feel like I really appreciate being there. I am looking forward to remounting this work. It's been stewing for a long time and I want to give it its chance. I'm looking forward to coming back at it. My original plan for this next year was that I created a show in 2016, 2018, and then in 2020. And so I've been generating pretty actively. And I was really looking at this year of wanting to produce more and being able to take this material and tour it, show it in different communities, connecting to more broader areas. So now I'm thinking about how that can happen, you know, what that looks like. And maybe these lessons learned now will definitely influence that too.
Yeah, for sure. Great things to look forward to. Thank you, Jennifer, so much for sharing all of that.
Sure.
And for your time as well.